I am the Programme and Comms Officer for the Community Share Scotland team. So yeah, work with groups kind of at an early stage, going quite a lot of kind of community engagement type stuff. So yeah, it's great to see so many of you here this morning. Hopefully we can have a nice interactive chatty session.
Great, so I'm going to share my slides. So this is 40 minutes to community engagement, which isn't enough time really to get into the nuts and bolts. So just to say that is a foundation, so an introduction to community engagement. And if anyone wants some more one-to-one support on community engagement after the workshop, then get in touch with Susie and that can be coordinated. Okay, I shall share my slides. Okay, so we're going to do the session's going to involve going through some key principles about community engagement, why it's a good idea, and to briefly talk through a good practice community engagement journey. And then if we've got time in the end, we're really keen to hear from you guys about your community engagement journey, some good practice examples, maybe some bad practice examples, and to learn from each other. So to kick off, I just want to talk through what I like to call the 6 key principles of community engagement. Before I go through those, I think it's just really, really important to say that community engagement is the key to success for any community-based enterprise. Like I said, we've been doing this for 10 years now. We've supported numerous community businesses across Scotland, and I have to say that if a group manage to get their community engagement right, they are much, much more likely to be a successful community business. So the community engagement has to be thorough and it has to be thoughtful throughout the whole journey of your community-based business. And as part of that, if you can invest money into it, that always helps, and crucially invest time into it as well. So time and money being invested into it through the whole process. So the 6 key principles of community engagement. This is kind of my opinion, Katie's opinion. So feel free to challenge us at the end on these. But number 1 is being clear. So what I mean by that is, when you're doing community engagement, decide what you're going to say before you say it, and always try and simplify where possible. We're going to do a slide shortly about formulating key messages that will pick up on this in a wee bit more detail. Second one is being realistic. So as amazing it is to have a pipe dream and to have lots of ideas, don't give your community a completely blank page. Don't set yourself up to fail. Always try and remind yourself about your parameters and the realistic environment of your community. Be honest. So things go wrong. Things always go wrong. I've never seen a fully smooth community engagement journey. But if you keep people informed and included and up to date on the process and what has gone wrong, then they're much more likely to be happy with that. I often use a story of when I was at university. I worked for the festival and my job was to manage queues, and in particular manage queues when the shows were running very, very late. And what I realised is that people went from incredibly grumpy to actually very friendly and chatty if they just understood why the show was running late and what had happened. So I often keep that in mind about just being honest with people and being open. Be inclusive. So don't just go to the usual suspects. You know, that's really the easy thing to do, the low-hanging fruit. So think about who are the quiet voices in your community, who are the people that are harder to reach, and clearly think about any accessibility requirements that might be needed as well. Be positive. So positivity is infectious. Don't forget about the foundations and the reason why you started this in the first place. But also, if you find yourself getting exhausted or a bit downtrodden, then it's absolutely acceptable to pass the baton to somebody else and to just take a step back for a while. And then finally, be organised. So I've seen so many community engagement campaigns that are really brilliant in terms of being really creative, talking to lots of different people in the community, gathering lots of amazing ideas. But the admin and the data collection that sits behind it, if that is not done well, then it's wasted. So what I mean by this is collect names of people, collect contact details, create a database, make sure that your community engagement is being administered in an organised fashion. And obviously there's GDPR considerations that have to be taken into account there that we can talk through if needs be. And finally, collective responsibility. This is absolutely key. Community engagement cannot be done by one person. It can't even be done by 3 people, I could argue. You need a crowd, you need a group. You need a good basis of potentially around about 6 people, and you need to collectively take responsibility for it and share the load, and also use that opportunity to pass the enthusiasm around and support each other. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Katie now.
Yep. So yeah, just we thought it would kind of helpful just to talk a little bit around the kind of benefits of, effective community engagement. Why are you doing this? And what is it bringing to kind of your project overall? We'd be happy for anyone to kind of interject at this moment in time if they've got any thoughts on any kind of benefits that they have seen of maybe some of you, if you're a little bit further on in your journey, in terms of, taking over your pub, maybe you've already taken ownership and have feel that you've done some pretty effective community engagement. But we've just got some thoughts on it. And again, happy for anybody to put it in the chat or just to kind of pop their mic on and make any kind of put in their own thoughts. But yeah, can I don't know if that's maybe
there we go. Yeah.
So first things first, I think one of the key kind of benefits of community engagement is you're actually going to find out exactly what your community need and what they want, because I guess if you're a group and you're working on a pub project, there's maybe a handful of you, you've got your board, etc. And you think you know what the community needs and wants, but the community might have some different ideas, and I'm pretty sure that's going to be standard across the board. So yeah, it's a really good way to find out exactly what your community need and want from the pub. It sets you up to succeed. I think as Morven said, most of the groups that we've worked with, and this isn't even just unique to pub groups, but effective community engagement can really set you up to succeed, because if someone's engaged within your community at an early stage, then chances are they'll be engaged the whole way through. If you're doing a share offer, it might make them more likely to invest, might make them more likely to volunteer and give their time in other ways. So yeah, effective community engagement is really important in terms of success. And then it's a good way for the community to see the campaign as their campaign. So it's not just a case of your group versus the rest of the community. It's a way to bring everybody in and get everybody involved. So it's kind of that idea of that kind of collective responsibility, and then everybody kind of feels like they want to take ownership of it to push it forward. People feel that they've had their say. And that kind of hopefully minimises the risk of people popping up on your Facebook page to make comments and suggestions at a later date if they feel that they've been engaged early on in the project. Again, we've seen that, and I'm sure some of you have had experience of that kind of thing where if people aren't engaged initially, perhaps it might cause issues down the line. So good way to bring people in. And yeah, probably tied to that a little bit is it reduces the risk of opposition. So if anyone has those feelings, at least, if you're at an early stage and you're bringing a group together to do some community consultation, or if you're kind of further down the line and you're up and running and maybe people don't quite like the way that you're doing things, it's just a way to kind of have that kind of transparent, conversation with people around how things are done and how people want things to be done. It's a good way to learn new information and ideas. It's good to kind of see, you might be a group of people and you're thinking, well, we need like somebody who's good at social media. We need someone who, can do this or that. So it's a good way to kind of pull new people in, learn from the, people within the community, see what skills are out there. If other people might have capacity to push an engagement piece forward. It's just a really good way to bring other people and ideas into the fold. And yeah, that kind of ties into what the next point is of getting people interested and involved, because I think as we kind of touched on in that first slide, it does take time, and it can take time, and to try and keep the momentum up, it's good to have as wide a group of people involved as possible, so that no one person feels like it's all on their shoulders to really drive a kind of community engagement piece forward. So yeah, I'll just hand it back to Morven.
Great, and yeah, please do write other benefits that you've seen in the chat, if there's additional things that you want to add there. So I'm going to give you 1 minute. We're going to sit in awkward silence, but I think I want to ask you to do something. So can you just sit for 1 minute and in your head try to identify and define your community? I'm purposely making that quite broad. So I'm just going to give you that task for maybe we'll say 30 seconds. So please have a think about how you identify and define your community. Okay, that's probably enough awkward silence. So who, and maybe just like show of hands, who thought in terms of geography, in terms of postcodes or community council areas? Okay. Who thought in terms of population? So in terms of numbers of people? Okay, a few of you. Who thought in terms of demographics, so the type of age, or yeah, okay, some more. Okay, so maybe slightly more unusual. Who had words pop into their head, like descriptive words like beautiful or deprived or whatever it might be? Okay, again, a couple of you. And who thought very specifically about the community that they are targeting at the moment in terms of their specific project that they've got? Okay, so a big variety, which is the point of that little exercise. People think that defining your community is really easy, but it's really, really not. But it is the number one first task that has to happen when you're doing community engagement, in terms of going, who are you literally trying to speak to here? So clearly you can define by geography. That's important in some cases. So whether it's postcodes, community council area, it can also be a community of interest. So we work with groups sometimes where they have a geographical base, but also they can reach out to a diaspora of people or people that are interested in a specific topic. It is important, I think, if you can get access to this information, and this is something that Community Share Scotland can help with a detailed report of the basic demographics of your area, because it will really help you to target your community engagement campaign. So we have a piece of software called Community Insights that we use at Community Share Scotland, that we can talk to people about if that is relevant. I think it's really important to talk about the emotions around a community. So as a steering group or as a board, you might want to do a quick exercise where you just as a solo person think about what words would you use to define your community. So write those down and then share them within your steering group or within your board, and compare and make sure you actually all agree. And if you don't agree, that's fine, but that's something to be aware of. If you are working on a specific project, and clearly this is, we're talking about community-run pubs here, who or what is your target audience for that specific project? Clearly, you're not going to have children at the top of your list or young people as your key target for a community-run pub in the same way that you might with a community centre. I've touched upon this already, but what challenges do you face accessing those people and communicating fairly with all? So I know that you will all know who your loud voices in your community are and who your community connectors are. But who are those people that have never had their voice heard in the community? And have a really good think about how you can access those people and do it in a way that they will want to be communicated with, and that is fair. One other consideration that we have in Scotland is often the definition of community is influenced by other funders or other stakeholders. So a good example of this is our big land fund, so the Scottish Land Fund. So they asked that 51% of the business of the enterprise is locally controlled. So that's something to be aware of as well, if there's other people that have stipulations in terms of how you might define your community. Katie.
So this might seem quite, I mean, we've tried to keep this quite simple. And I think it comes up regardless of kind of what stage you're at in your kind of journey. You could be very early stage and looking to consult with the community, or you could be, you know, open and trading and you really need to get some volunteers on board, or you're maybe looking to engage with other kind of community groups who might want to use your space at times where the pub is kind of quieter. You know, there could be different stages where this is applicable. So I think we always kind of try to break it down into the three kind of key messages of your community engagement piece. So what are you trying to achieve? What's the goal? And again, kind of listening to those voices in the community who are kind of telling you their opinions on it. Because I guess sometimes if you're working so closely on something and you're so focused on it, it can be harder to see the bigger picture. So kind of, you know, zooming out a little bit and looking at, you know, what overall you're trying to achieve. Next, why is it important and beneficial to the community? And again, that's that kind of piece where it helps to maybe take a little bit of a step back to go, you know, what other benefits can the pub being open bring to the community, or you know, what can having a group of volunteers, you know, bring to the pub. Different things like that are really useful to kind of consider when you're working on an engagement piece. But also, you know, how do you get people involved? And I think that's probably one of the hardest things to do. How do you actually kind of engage with those people? Because everybody's going to be different. You know, you might want to get more young people involved, and that will involve a different outreach. You know, a bit of partnership working with schools, for example, to get some, you know, volunteers maybe to do things like your social media. You might want to, as I said, make links with other community organisations within the community, and again, that's going to need a different approach. So it's kind of breaking it down into, you know, what is the bigger picture that you're trying to look at, and looking at your kind of we're going to come on to that a little bit in terms of, you know, who you're trying to reach out to, and that then might start to kind of dictate how you actually reach out to them as well.
Thanks, Katie. We've got some good examples of this, if that would be helpful as well. So groups that have actually formulated these key messages that we can share in due course. So we're just going to talk through a community engagement journey. So what are the different stages, and what kinds of things might you do at the different stages? We're going to talk through a best practice community engagement journey, and then we're going to talk about a maybe more realistic or not bad practice, but realistic community engagement journey. So we tend to split community engagement into three areas. So consulting, informing, and engaging. So consulting, which we've talked about already, is asking your community for their opinions, for their needs, and for their ideas. So it's an opportunity for your community to talk to you. Informing is about you as a group communicating your ideas and your plans with your community. And engaging is a two-way conversation and a two-way process where if you're actively involving your community in an agreed plan. Just to say, this isn't a linear process, so we're not saying you consult and then you inform, then you engage, and then, you know, it's community engagement done. You will want to consult, inform, and engage at every stage of your community engagement journey. Clearly, at the beginning, consulting is more important, and towards the end of your project or the middle of your project, engaging might be more important, but just to say it's not linear. And then crucially, for all three of these different sections of community engagement, you always want to be thinking about who you're communicating with, so your audience, what method you're going to use, what resources you're going to need, so people and materials, and then clearly who is going to be responsible for it. So that collective responsibility point, again, that we made. So a good practice community engagement journey. We don't have a huge amount of time here, so this is really going to be a very quick overview. And if anyone wants to pick up one-to-one with either of us afterwards, we can talk it through in a bit more detail. So consulting, so I think we've said all this already, but this is about making sure that you're finding out what your community needs, what it wants, generating new ideas, reducing opposition risk, getting folks interested, sometimes even redefining your community. You'll find that if you do community consultation, your eyes will be open to a new section of your community or a new definition of your community that was closed off to you before. We're going to talk a little bit shortly about what methods you might want to use for this stage. But one thing that I would say is you want, again, to make sure that you're being clear, you're being realistic. You are asking both closed and open questions and making sure that you're gathering contact details in an appropriate way throughout this process. So once you've spoken to these people, you know how to get back in touch with them. Informing, so this is about talking to your community and telling them about your plans and your next stages. So this is about keeping the community updated. It's about starting that two-sided conversation, and it's a really good opportunity for you guys as a group to actually start distilling your ideas into a plan and distilling your community consultation information into a plan. In terms of how you might do it, so clearly you have to digest that consultation, literally form an action plan, so write this stuff down, formulate your key messages, as Katie just talked about, revisit your audiences again, so make sure that you are making sure that you're talking to as many people in your community as possible, and adapt. And then finally, engaging. This is the hardest bit, as Katie has said. So I'm not saying that consulting and informing is easy, but it is much more of a one-way process. Whereas engaging, this is about getting people involved and asking them to do stuff, which all of you in the call will know, because this is what you do, is that's the hard bit in terms of actually asking the community to get involved and to get on board. However, this is the absolute key part. So it's the key to success in terms of your community business journey. One thing we'll talk about shortly is what you're asking people to do. So defining the various supporter roles that are out there and the various tasks that that someone might actually pick up. We say to groups at this stage is be quite relentless. People do need to be asked quite a lot, and you might feel awkward about it, but we say be positive, like don't be shy, make the ask. You're doing a really good thing for your community, often very much on a a volunteer-led basis. So being positive and making sure you directly make the ask of people to say, can you please help out and can you do this, and assign tasks and responsibility. So again, that organization point of actually be really clear about what you're asking people to do and what their responsibility is and when you want them to do it. So we thought it would be good to talk about an actual practice community engagement journey. So from our experience of doing this over the years, what might go wrong and what might the barriers actually be? So in terms of consulting, what we see quite a lot is that, first of all, there is a real lack of clarity and consensus around who or what the community is. So going back to our slide about defining the community and making sure that that is task number one. Time pressure, community engagement doesn't often just come along in a nice, easy, relaxed fashion. It's often because there's an asset to be bought, or there's an asset that's about to be lost, or there's an opportunity in the community, there's a new fund that's launched. It's often about time pressure or crisis or opportunity. So having to do it quickly is often the reality. Contacts either being completely non-existent. So how do you find out how you communicate with people? Or if you're maybe an existing organization, that's the moment you find out that half of your contacts are completely out of date. Loud opposition often arises at this point, and I have to say that this is often a good thing in the long run. You want to get that out the way now, and I don't mean out the way as in don't deal with it, but out the way as in listen to those loud voices, listen to what they're saying, take their feedback on board and adapt if needs be. And often we find at this stage that you're at the beginning of your journey, there's only a couple of people involved and you don't have any money to do it. So we're aware of these barriers. In terms of the informing stage, so once you get to the point of you're trying to communicate back to the community about what you're aiming to do, we find communities often find the consultation response is incredibly varied and very, very difficult to distill and to digest. So that's again something that we can help with. And trying to drive something forward and make decisions and identify priorities without being the voice of the community. That's a very delicate balance. Often at this point, we see communities completely veer off track. So they might have done community consultation and something comes back where it's like, actually, I don't want a pub, I want a swimming pool. And then they're like, oh yeah, swimming pool sounds like a great idea, let's do that. As an extreme example, but always trying to make sure that you can come back to the original purpose of your consultation. Again, time, resource, money, it's a trend, there isn't enough of it. Also, I think it's important at this point to know when to close that feedback loop. It can get to the point where you're just going round and round and round, asking for opinions, informing the community what you're going to do. They say, actually, no, we don't want this, and you go round and round and round. So knowing when to draw the line is important. And finally, the engagement bit. So when you're getting to the stage of actually asking people to join the campaign, get involved, do some things, what's the reality here? It can be exhausting. It absolutely is tiring, this stage. You might have a case of you've got too many people involved. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes, if it's a very, very if it's a campaign that just grabs the attention in your community, it might actually be overwhelming how many people want to be involved. More often than not, you've got too few people, so having to really put the effort in, like I said, to make that ask and get people involved. It really needs careful and clever coordination at this point, and we often say that if you can have someone on your board be that volunteer coordinator or that engagement coordinator, it really helps making the process a little bit more organised and a bit smoother. Sometimes we see that at this point you get takeover bids, which is, if you ask someone to get involved and to play a role, they can take that really seriously and actually do a lot or too much maybe. But again, it's kind of trying to be sensible about why are they saying that? Why are they saying we're maybe doing something different, should be doing something different? Why do they want to take over? And being conscious that that might happen in the first instance is often a good start. So methods, Katie, I'll hand back to you.
Yep. So this isn't an exhaustive list by any means. And again, I think when we come to have a bit of a chat later on, we can probably discuss in a wee bit more detail, but there's lots of different ways that you can engage with the community. So I'm pretty sure, you'll have all done a variety of all these things, but in terms of informing, it could be paper or digital questionnaires, surveys, things like SurveyMonkey can be really good. So that can cut down on sending things out paper wise. kind of visual creative consultations, and we've got a bit of an example of that in a couple of slides time, just about sort of, you know, making it a little bit more interactive, getting people moving. That can always be quite important, rather than people just kind of sitting down talking maybe a little bit too much. And that's where, again, you can maybe get those arguments and disagreements and maybe too many opinions coming out. Filmmaking, a lot of the groups that we've worked with in terms of share offers, you know, they don't necessarily need to cost a lot of money. It could, some of it can be done on a phone, but making kind of short films to kind of inform the community of what's going on, what kind of stage that you're at. Public meetings, always good to just kind of get people to face. Again, that can be from, you know, right from the beginning, your community consultation, to kind of gauge what the community wants to do, right through to if you're potentially thinking about doing a community share offer, or you're doing a community share offer, you know, having that real face kind of run through of, you know, the details of the share offer. And then informal discussions around the community. Maybe this one's a little bit, yeah, this could be a bit controversial, because probably none of you really want to get stuck talking to people in the community, which can lead on to, you know, discussing other issues that you might get pulled into. But I think it is quite good to kind of look at who, you know, who are the community connectors, who are good, who are good at talking to people, who are good at going out and doing that kind of face-to-face engagement, you know, in the community, and, you know, looking at people's strengths and kind of using them for that. Piggybacking on existing groups and events, I think that can, you know, in terms of especially resource and time, you know, and money, this can be a really good way of kind of getting involved, you know, or is there other events going on, even, you know, if there's like little festivals or street parties or farmers market, or if there's any existing groups who are kind of well known within the community, you know, can they put some comms out about what you're doing? Can they let people know that you're looking for new volunteers, or that you're thinking about doing a share offer? Just a really good way to kind of, you know, combine resources so that, you know, you're not having to maybe spend as much time and money on things. Social media, I think obviously that's an obvious one. Really useful for groups, and doesn't necessarily have to cost a lot of money. It can be really time consuming though, and I think that's always something to kind of factor in, that you know, maybe having a kind of dedicated social media person within your group can be really useful, because it, you know, it can take time to put posts together, and especially if you're then having to kind of go back and forward and through the comments, etc. So yeah, having a kind of dedicated person to manage that is always quite a good idea. If you're already have taken ownership of the building, an open day can be quite useful, just to kind of show people around, even if it's not, you know, a stage where it's open. If there's still work needing done, I think just having that kind of open door policy can, you know, help people see what's going on, so that they're kind of kept in the loop. Suggestion boxes in, you know, local shop or library, or in the pub itself, just as a way that people can kind of, you know, if they have something that pops into their head, there's maybe nobody around to speak to, they can just put the suggestion in, and it can be looked at another time without, you know, having to get involved in a sort of more formal discussion about it. And then small focus groups with specific audiences. And again, this can be, you know, a good way of kind of pulling those different voices in the community together to get their opinions on things, but also can be a good way of, you know, if you've got enough volunteers, if you've got enough staff, kind of small subgroups within your organisation that can kind of maybe look at tackling different tasks. And that's something we'll come on to. We've got a bit of an example of like an action plan where that might be a bit more applicable. And then the old school posters, banners, leaflets, can probably never have too many of those, just around the community, just to kind of, again, have it right in people's face, like what you're doing with all your kind of key information. If you're doing a face-to-face meetup, or if you're having an open day, you know, not everybody uses social media, so it's just really important to kind of still have those kind of traditional methods of communicating with people. And then door-to-door knocking, I think a lot of groups that we've worked with, and this is not just relevant to pubs, you know, face-to-face and even one-to-one engagement can be really important, because you can have those more in-depth conversations. It can be a way to really address concerns that people have. So yeah, traditional kind of having that kind of really close contact with someone can make all the difference in terms of them actually engaging with the work that you're doing. And then we've put a question mark around this one because again, not everybody's councillors and MPs or MSPs might be all that engaged, but if they might take a specific interest in the project, so it's always worth reaching out to them, see if they'll come and pay you a visit. Will they put it in their social media? Will they talk about it to the relevant people? Is really important. And again, some groups that we've worked with have even managed to get celebrities on board, which again isn't maybe necessarily realistic for all groups, but something to think about. Is there a celebrity from your area? Did they grow up there? Would they be willing to spread the word? We have seen that with pubs, with community-owned football clubs, things like that. So yeah, it's worth just kind of looking at the kind of bigger players within the community that might be willing to give a bit of their time and a bit of their influence to the project.
Thanks, Katie. I'm trying to think what the best celeb we've had so far. There was that guy from Outlander that got loads of attention. Some hunk from Outlander. It was from a little town in the borders. Right, we're almost getting to time, so we'll just do a few more minutes. So a couple of final slides. So this is all very good in terms of the methods and why you might do things and what a good practice journey is, but clearly this is engagement to do what? Like, what are you asking people to do? What are you asking them to engage with? And I think something that we say a lot is try and think about all the different roles that a community member could play. And it might be that they do one of these things, or they do all of these things, or two of these things. But some examples are, you do want people to join your organizations. That's something to bear in mind, that actually as a community business, you will be a membership organization. So that's something that you want to have the consistent messaging around of, please join as a member. However, on top of that, or alongside that, you might want to think about, are there people in the community who have maybe 3 months to give and they've got lots of energy for 3 months, but then they need to go back and do their day jobs? Could they be a kind of short-term advocate or supporter or activist for that time? If you're going to be setting up a community business, clearly you're going to need employees and volunteers. So it's something to think about at the early stage of targeting those people that might actually want to be involved in the business in the long run. As a business, you're going to need customers, you're going to need service users, you're going to offer services that will have beneficiaries. So people in your community will occupy those roles as well. And something that we do see is that if you do a really effective community engagement campaign, and particularly if you do a community share offer, it's a great marketing exercise. People are going to be much more likely to use that business and be a customer if they are a member of it, or if they've invested in it, or if they just know more about it. So it actually creates a really resilient business model if you do good community engagement. Suppliers and partners. So as a community business, you'll need suppliers for that business. You'll need people that you work with. So community members could be a supplier or could be a partner. And then investors and directors. So every community business needs money. So I imagine a lot of you in the room either have done or will do a community share offer. So you're going to be asking people to invest in your community business if they can afford to do so. And also it's a really good way to get new directors onto your management committee and to get new blood in through your community engagement. So just to finish up with a couple of creative examples. So these are just kind of a couple of examples of groups that have done something that is just like a little bit different out of the norm. It's not your usual just, public meeting or a survey. So maybe starting with the bottom middle. So this was a group that went to their primary school and they did a little session with all the primary school kids to design the logo for their community shop. So I think it's a really simple and effective way of engaging young people in the community. It could be that you ask the high school kids to create a video, a marketing video. So yeah, that's one way to engage young folk in the community in a creative way. Top left, this was a group that we worked with in Loch Ness, which I hope is very obvious. And we like to use this as an example of something that was really effective, but actually really simple. They painted that poster themselves. And as you can see, it's not high tech, it's literally done with poster paint and cardboard. But it was just a really visual way of showing their progress of their community share offer, and engaging the community that way. So if you have a mascot in the community or something, an iconic building, use that and use it quite visually. The picture top left that was Loch Ness Hub as well, and that woman was just a really well loved and well known character in the community. So it was quite a clever use, and to be clear, she wanted to be part of the campaign, of using people in the community who everybody respects, and then will be more likely to get behind the campaign if they know that that they are also behind it. Bottom left is a community business that we worked with that was about creating homes for life for previously homeless men. So it was important to them to show that they had other partners in the homeless sector involved in the project. So they did a really effective social media campaign with quotes from chief execs and people from other housing providers or other people in the homeless and housing sector. And then finally, probably my favourite example is the one on the right hand side. So this is Huntly, which is in north of Scotland. And this was an early stage community engagement exercise where they had 5 barrels full of coloured rocks. So each of the colours represented something different. I'm going to get this wrong, but it was something like green was, I feel really positive about this part of the community. Red was, this needs to change. I think blue was something like, I have a really happy memory here. And people filled a bag full of rocks and went around the community and left the rocks physically in the places around the community, depending on how they felt about it. And then the organisation that was helping facilitate this engagement did a massive map that went up in the community with those coloured dots popped on it. So there's a really visual explanation of how the community feel about the different buildings and different assets within their space. And then finally, yeah, Katie, do you want to just say anything about this? This is really just about kind of formalizing it all, isn't it, and putting it into action.
Yeah, I think this is just a very brief example. I think we've got a few questions and stuff in the chat that would be good to get to. So I think we probably won't go over this in detail. We could even put a template together if if anyone feels that this is helpful. But it's just about, what Morven mentioned right at the start, which is that kind of collective responsibility and really breaking it down into black and white, so that, people know what they're doing, who you're trying to target, what your method is going to be, the resources you need, the deadline, and who's responsible, and just really having that written down, keeping everybody right, and so that everybody knows what their task is. If you can try and break it down like that, can sometimes just be quite helpful to kind of keep momentum going, and also just so that no one task is falling on the shoulders of one person. It's it's spread out and kind of evenly divvied up, really. So yeah, it's quite a good way of putting it into a plan, into action.
Thanks, Katie. And yeah, we can send around a template. Definitely. Great, I'll stop sharing then. And I think we've got about 15 minutes left. Is that right, Susie?
Yeah. Thank you both. That was great, a great introduction. I'm sure everybody found it as useful as I did. We have 3 questions in the chat so far, so I reckon if we can ask those and then perhaps just encourage everybody just to start a bit of a chat with other questions you might have. So first, Morven and Katie, Ian's asked, to what extent do you think involvement is transactional/reward driven, and to what extent do you think we should foster that?
Let me go to that question to make sure I'm hearing it right. To what extent do you think involvement is transactional, reward driven? Ian, do you want to just maybe come on and ask the question yourself, so we can get an absolute sense of exactly what you mean there?
Sure. Morning all.
Hello.
I think where I'm coming from is looking at various sort of crowdfunding exercises where it seems that there's always a reward for whatever you do. or whatever, different roles, different levels of involvement. Is that a principle that we should be looking at, or should we just, not not risk compromising the future of the business by offering rewards that would impinge on its profitability?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And actually, me and Morven kind of spoke about this yesterday when we were thinking about other pub groups, for example, because I'm sure you'll have all probably seen the Old Forge in Noidart at some point, which was a really, they ran a really successful campaign to take over their pub. They were probably lucky in the sense that they had also quite a romantic story, which was, it was the most remote pub in mainland Britain, and it got picked up by the press, etc., etc. But through their crowdfunding campaign, they offered quite a lot of rewards. You could get your name on the bar. I think you could get stools that were inscribed, etc., etc. But I think what we've always said to groups, and it's not just unique to pub groups, is it has to be realistic. You don't want to add to your plate, of meeting these kinds of rewards. I guess for that example, they were able to do a lot of that when they were doing their refurbishment. But it has to be manageable, because you just, when you're trying to do lots of other things that you don't want to add to your plate. I mean, I don't know what you think, Morven. I think it doesn't necessarily need to be reward driven. It more, if you've got your messaging and people kind of believe in the project, I don't think you should have to necessarily incentivize them, especially when that costs time and money. And it's a massive, it could be a real capacity issue going forward if you're trying to just get the pub up and running, really. So
yeah, I totally agree. I think the reward should be that you're going to have a successful and great community business in your community. And I know that maybe sounds a bit silly, but actually genuinely that should be the messaging of get involved, and the benefit will be that you'll have a great pub, or you'll have a great shop, whatever it is, in your community. I think Katie's right. Sometimes we've seen it where it works really well, but where it works well is where it's often maybe not a physical thing that you're offering, where you're getting into the territory of posting things out or sending things out or changing the infrastructure of the place. I would steer away from that if you can.
I mean, it could be something as simple as maybe an opening party or something, that people can come along to, or if you really felt it could be doable, some sort of loyalty card scheme, something like that. Maybe people get a free drink after a certain amount of time, things like that are hopefully a little bit less onerous cost wise and capacity wise. But yeah, I think we wouldn't necessarily say that you have to always reward people for their for getting involved.
Thank you, Katie. Thanks, Morven. Roger has asked, how in a bigger group of people do you reconcile the different views of how to do things?
Good question, Roger. With difficulty? Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. And you just have to use a variety of methods depending on the demographics of your group. So things that I've seen that work in the past, of maybe breaking it down. So often when it is too big and it's too many people, actually just breaking it down into smaller groups, and then having a representative for that group or a spokesperson to then come together. We've used a method recently called a fishbowl, which is a method where you have a big group of people and then you have 5 seats in the middle, and it's only the people in the 5 seats in the middle that can talk at that point. However, if someone wants to join the conversation from the outside circle, they just come in and they tap someone on the shoulder and they swap that way. So there's tools and resources and methods that can be used to facilitate a better conversation. But you do need tools and resources and methods. It doesn't just happen naturally, I would say. Having a very good chair, and a chair that is not a talker, but is a facilitator and a listener and a coordinator of people, is often very helpful as well.
Thank you. Roger, would you like to ask the second part to your question, the flip side of having a big group?
Oh, you're quite likely to start off with a small group, and it's likely to be some of the community activists have already taken on a lot of activity, and they're under pressure from other demands. And how do you prioritize? If you sit down and you probably do a lot of work, and you see where some of the things that need doing, and you need to prioritize immediately needed activity so as to expand the size of the group and progress it into a full campaign.
Mm-hmm.
It's where we are. We've got a small group that's been just bouncing around, doing activities, getting catching people's interest, and then not being able to follow it up sufficiently and be able to expand that group. We have our demographic is a hard-pressed working class community, and the skill levels and experience of actually being successful is low. So it's difficult. People just don't come out necessarily to do things, but there are people there who can do it if you can reach them.
I would say two things. And first of all, I don't have a magic wand. Like, there are communities where people are absolutely stretched, and the idea of going to volunteer for a community business is just not possible. So I absolutely understand that is the reality for a lot of people. I'd say two things. One is that often we find you can engage people if you do it on a short-term, precise basis. So if you say to people, come and join our board, and it's this project that's going to take 10 years, they're going to go, whoa, no thank you. Whereas if you say, come and join, we've got a task for you, it's going to take 2 months, and here are the clear tasks that we want you to do and the outcomes that we want to achieve, people are much, much more likely to go, okay, that sounds manageable, and there's an exit route, and they might end up staying or they might end up going, but both of those options are fine. And then the second thing is creativity. I really think that this is so important, that if you can find a way to do something that is creative, involving art, music, young people, physical event, something that's a little bit different, people are much more likely to get engaged and to get involved. And I know that takes time and effort, and it's not for everybody, but it is something that we do see that works, that people will engage if they can physically see something quite creative and quite fun in their community.
Thank you. I'm mindful of the time and that we're not going to get through all the questions that we've got in the chat. So what I'd like to ask is, if you have any questions you haven't yet asked, put them in the chat, please, because I will follow up with the answers after this session, including getting a bit more information from Morven about the community demographics that a couple of you have asked about. So watch this space, we'll come back to you.
Yeah.
We have got time to take potentially one more. So I'm going to ask Kate's question. Kate has asked, how do people keep it fresh when the message is often the same? So they've been working for 5 years to try to purchase their business. So do you have any tips on that at all?
How do you keep it fresh? So Kate, can you give us a wee bit more of a kind of background of where you're at, perhaps, if you want to?
I can just done a video on as well. Hello. Hello from England.
Hello.
The centre of England is a mile up the road. Yeah, we have a very non-compliant owner who is really not engaging with us. We have I've just been putting a letter together, sort of saying, tell us how much you want. You know, we've been doing it since 2019, and I'm sort of the main publicity secretary person for everything, and I just wondered if anybody else is finding the same, and you know, any sort of top tips for keeping it fresh. You know, I like the videos. I'm going out later to do some videos. You know, so it's just the frustration of people go, how's the pub going? You know, so I dread walking down the road because people will grab me because they know it's me. You know, yeah, we're doing our best, but if anybody's got any like top tips, I'd love to hear them.
I'll let other people jump in, but maybe one thing to say is I think sometimes it's okay to actually not have stuff to say for a while and actually stop talking about it. Clearly you have to, if you've got members, you have to do fairly regular updates, but it's kind of, projects do go up and down, and the up will be more stark and more obvious and more positive if there's been a bit of a dip. And going back to my point at the very beginning about being honest, it's okay to say, actually, things are really difficult at the moment. This might not happen, and I'm trying my best, but it's really difficult. And then when you do have something more positive to say in the future, then people will be like, oh, okay, it's happening again. So maybe you don't.
We're just heading into our share offer.
Okay.
Obviously, we had pledges and stuff, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
But we're about to go into the share offer. So yeah, I'm doing all those things. So that's good. I just wanted to hear somebody else say
I don't have a magic wand. I don't know if anyone else does.
Thank you.
And well done. Also, it's not an easy role.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think with 1 minute to go, I'm going to wrap it up, mindful of everybody's time. As I said, I'll come back to what's been put in the chat. So I will say a very big thank you to Morven and Katie. That was really helpful. And thank you to everybody for coming along and being so engaged with it. For those of you who are here from the Scottish Community Owned Pubs Network, don't forget that if you're in the early stages, we have got these feasibility grants of up to £2,000 to help you with early stage costs. So if you want to find out more about how to access those, then get in touch. And any of you, whether you're in Scotland or in the other UK nations and you'd like further advice on community engagement or any other topic, you know that we're here. So just give us a call. So thank you again to our speakers and to all of you, and keep in touch.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having us, Susie.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Susie.
Bye.
Bye.